do, I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Folks, we've got a great show for you today. Happy May Day. Yesterday was International Workers' Day, May the 1st. We had a good time in Huntsville. Hope you had a good time. Our phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. You can leave us a voicemail at that number at any time, and you can call us throughout the show when we have the phone open. I think we'll be opening the phones in the second half of the program. You can also leave us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. We do have a voicemail to play later on in the program, so appreciate folks who are leaving voicemails. We're going to jump right into it today. We have on the line Dave Cann. Dave Cann is the National Organizing Director for the American Federation of Government Employees. AFGE is the largest federal employees union, representing hundreds of thousands of workers nationwide at dozens of federal agencies, including right here in Huntsville. Dave, welcome back to the program. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We got an echo. I think that's probably on our end. Not sure what's up with that. But DOD workers in Huntsville and across the country got emails from their managers last week saying that they don't have a union anymore. Can you tell us why they got those emails last week?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to start by saying that they absolutely do. There is nothing that the agency or management can ever do to take away your union, whether you're a federal employee or not. But a bit of background on what's going on. 1.3 million employees in the federal service have been told similar things, and none of it is true. And we've been knocking it down agency by agency in their efforts to union bust. But a little bit about the background on it is this administration started promising a war on federal employees. They said that most federal work was fraud, waste, or abuse, and that they were going to start a special department called the Department of Government Efficiency to attack federal workers and the missions that they engage in. And early on, our union and other federal sector labor unions stood firm, saying that federal workers do important work, serving folks all over the country, and that it needed to be protected. And so from even before the second term for Trump began, we were engaged in a fight regarding the importance of federal workers and the protecting the terms and conditions of their work. And so the administration realized that we would be a bulwark against efforts to get rid of federal employees. And in their efforts to attack folks, they looked at a relatively infrequently used portion of the Civil Service Reform Act, which is a statute that gives federal employees the right to organize and have labor unions, which says that the executive can decide that any worker is engaged primarily in national security, and as a result of that, isn't entitled to have labor representation. It hasn't been used very often in the past 47 years that the statute's been around. I think every president looks at it and discusses whether or not certain groups in the margins apply. I remember in the Obama administration, they talked about whether or not IT workers who work in cybersecurity were engaged primarily in national security. But in an effort to take away the voice that folks had as they were defending their jobs against attacks from DOGE, they said 1.3 million workers were engaged primarily in national security. So people at the CDC that study allergies are engaged primarily in national security. People that work in the grocery stores on Army bases are engaged primarily in national security. The cleaning staff in VA hospitals are engaged primarily in national security. And in that, they said that folks aren't allowed to have labor union, and have tried to wipe away their rights. We've been fighting it in the courts, on the Hill, in the streets, and we've had a ton of success. They said TSA workers weren't allowed to have a union, and right now they, because of injunctive action that we've gotten in the courts, their contract is back in place. The VA, 315,000 workers, their contract is back in place. And we're optimistic the same will be true for the DoD. But significantly, I think the administration misunderstands what a labor union is and whether or not they're able to strike away what the union rights and get rid of them. Because at its core, our union is all of the workers and their ability to fight back against these actions. And I don't think they're going to be able to get people to stand down and stop protecting their jobs and stop standing shoulder to shoulder just because they tell folks that the union is gone, no matter what union busting they engage in. So that's a bit of background on what's happened so far, but I'm happy to get more into detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the mechanism that they're using to try to do this is one small piece of the Civil Service Reform Act, which the Civil Service legislation from the 70s, that there's one small line, like you said, that gives the president authority to exclude people who primarily do national security work from collective bargaining. And, what they're arguing is basically like it is at the president's sole discretion. There's no kind of fact of the matter question that can be arbitrated in the courts. This is the administration's position. Their position is if the president says that a worker primarily engages in national security issues and collective bargaining would hurt it, then the president gets to take away collective bargaining. And that seems to me to be, I know you're not a lawyer. We've had the General Counsel on before, and maybe, we can get him on again later. But that seems to me to just be a totally not sensical argument because, there has to be a fact of the matter. Presumably, the Congress, when they enacted this legislation, they had something in mind as to what constituted a worker who primarily worked in national security. Otherwise, they would have just given the president sole discretion to exclude people from collective bargaining for any reason at all. Because that's what the administration is arguing in effect, is that for any reason, I can just declare that a worker primarily works in national security, and then I can take away their collective bargaining rights. And that just does not seem to me to make sense, especially when you combine it with the history of the fact that, like you said, all other presidential administrations post this legislation being enacted in the 70s have basically all DOD employees have had collective bargaining rights. It's always been small units at the margins. It's never been, the whole DOD is primarily national security and collective bargaining would be a detriment. And so I don't, not that I have any confidence in this Supreme Court, but I just don't see how you can make a good faith argument that this is what the framers of this legislation intended when they passed the Civil Service Reform Act.
Well, there's an interesting wrinkle to that, and don't tell anybody I am a lay lawyer, but I like to be an organizer first.
Sure.
Let's assume, and they're not, but let's assume that the administration's position is correct, and that they can do it for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all. They're still not allowed to exclude people for an illegal reason. So let's use an analogy. Let's say I work at a non-unionized gas station. My boss, if I'm an at-will employee, can fire me for a good reason. Let's say I steal. They can fire me for a bad reason. Let's say they don't want people who are bald. That's not a protected class. They're allowed to fire me for that reason. They can fire me for an incorrect reason. They can say that I'm late all the time, even if I'm not. But they can't fire me for an illegal reason. So they can't fire me because I'm disabled or because of my race or my religion or my gender. The same thing would be true even if the Trump administration was allowed to decide unilaterally that people were engaged primarily in national security. So let's pretend that they say everybody in the DoD, everyone in the VA, everyone in NIH and CDC, they're all engaged primarily in national security. Now we know that's wrong, but let's say that they're allowed to. The administration has admitted quite often in the public record that the reason they're saying that all of these folks are excluded and all these folks are engaged primarily in national security is because they're mad that their unions have fought back against the attempts to erode and cut out federal service jobs. So what they're admitting constantly is that this is an action they're taking in retaliation for people's First Amendment protected activity. And I don't just mean the fact that being in a labor union is protected right to association. I mean speech. And so looking at the facts as they're applied, this is on its face illegal because it's retaliation for protected First Amendment speech. And so even if that we were to grant, which we don't, that they had unilateral power to carve folks out without any review, they're doing it for illegal reasons. And so when we've brought this to court, that's been one of the main arguments that we've had that's had some success in our moves for injunctive relief. So it's interesting that you bring that up. There's actually a pretty good hook to hang it on if we want to argue that they're not allowed to do this stuff based on their whims and caprices.
Right, right. And, we've talked about this on the program before, but I mean, one of the things that y'all are pointing to is the White House put out an FAQ or a fact sheet or something. Literally, the purpose of this document that they put out on the World Wide Web was, this is why we're doing it. And they listed, these unions have been obstinate in obstructing the president's agenda, and that's all right. We can do that if we want, and that's the First Amendment, and you don't have a right to tell us that we have to be in our thoughts and actions approving of everything the administration does. Like, that's not something that you can tell us to do, and that's not something that you can punish us for not doing. Just right there in 4K, as the kids say. And so, AFG is fighting this in the courts, and they've been very successful so far in doing that. And we actually, you mentioned that collective bargaining rights are back at the VA. Somebody in the chat said that they have a friend who's a steward at the VA that said that she's already back in her offices, the union offices at the VA. So definitely there's reason to believe, good reason to believe that AFG is going to be successful arguing the same thing for the DOD, and that DOD workers will have their kind of their legally recognized rights back, and their supervisors and the department will be made to acquiesce to that, and to treat the union like they exist. But even in the event that the courts don't side with AFGE, the AFGE's position is that whether that happens or not, workers still have a union, and there's still a benefit to having and being a part of a union. Can you lay some of that out? Like, why would it be, if I'm a worker on Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville and the union has no legal right to collective bargaining, or our contract has been ripped up, why should I be a part of a union and participate in that if the union doesn't have those legally recognized rights?
So glad you asked that question. There are two parts to it, and I'll start with some of the more basic ones that I think people will recognize on a day-to-day level. Then I'll go to the more urgent one, and then I'll get to the core of it. On a basic level, people are still being represented, and people are still having their needs met every day. In the federal sector, folks have grievance and arbitration rights from the contract, but they can also get represented if there's an adverse action, if they get written up, or if they get suspended, or the agency tries to terminate them. And what's called the Merit Systems Protections Board. So the union is still representing people if the agency tries to treat them unfairly on a day-to-day basis. Same as always. With the Merit Systems Protections Board, if people need workers' comp assistance, if people need EEOC representation, their union's still there fighting for them, same as always. So the union's not going anywhere. And folks may remember during the last Trump administration, they tried to get rid of us in a number of agencies, and we continued representing folks during the entire administration, and wound up getting full restitution for the things that were taken away at the end of it, including having folks get paid back for the time they took off on leave to represent folks when the agency wouldn't recognize the union. So we have full expectation the same thing will happen again. At the core of it, the real reason folks need to stay in the union, and the real reason people should stay in the union, is if you work in the federal government, but in DOD in particular, this administration doesn't want you to have your job at the end of these 3 years. They want that work either gone because they don't believe it should be getting done by the federal government at all, and it shouldn't be done by anyone, or they want that work privatized. They want one of the rich buddies of the administration to be getting a piece of the money and sending that work to contractors instead of federal employees. And I talk to DOD employees every day. And I talk to folks that say, we've got contractors working right next to us doing the same work, who don't have any protections on the job, who don't have any retirement benefits, who don't have health insurance, and they're doing the same work. And this administration has not been shy about admitting the fact their plan is to privatize all the work they can.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is nobody cares about whether or not that work is done by federal employees or contractors, except for federal employees and the people we bring into the fight with us. So right now, if folks want to have a job at the end of these 3 years, they need to be a part of the fight to fight against it. And we've been successful in fights to protect jobs with or without contracts over the past year. They tried to lay off 75,000 VA employees when they weren't recognized their contract. We stopped them from doing that. They tried to shut down 250 Social Security offices. We stopped them from doing that. They tried to shut down whole agencies where they weren't recognizing the contract, and we stopped them from doing that. And we did that because of worker power. It's not just court actions. It's folks acting like a labor union. And this comes back to the final piece of why it doesn't really matter at its core for the fight to protect our jobs, whether or not they're recognizing our union. Literally 100 years ago, in 1926, there was nobody in the United States who had a legally recognized labor union.
Mm-hmm.
But people were acting like unions all over the place. And factories weren't factorying, railroads weren't railroading, mines weren't mining, because people were standing up and demanding that they get treated fairly. And worker power was so great, so enormous, it created such a disruption that the people who were in charge said, we need to figure out a way to manage it, to control it. So they created an entire legal framework for railway workers, for federal workers, for private sector workers, where they said, take all this worker power that we can't control and channel it into contracts, into grievances, into arbitrations, into administrative proceedings for the NLRB or the FLRA, because we can't control worker power. And this administration has made the mistake of thinking that if they brush away that legal framework, they're getting rid of worker power, but they're not. Mm-hmm. They're not. They're wiping away the ways that it gets channeled through lawyers and staff like me, who exercise it on behalf of workers and saying, show us what you can really do. And we've used that muscle to fight back against all of these attacks on federal workers, because it's not staff in litigation that's getting it done alone. It's workers standing shoulder to shoulder, realizing that they have the power. The only thing that can stand in our way is if we believe agency misinformation when they say the union is gone, and we willingly lay down and let them roll over us. Because if that does happen at the end of these 3 years, none of us will have jobs.
Right.
But if we stand together and fight back, we've won in the past. We've continued to win over the past year, and I'm very optimistic in the DoD workers in Redstone Arsenal and everywhere else that we're not going to let this agency and not let this administration roll over us.
You know, you mentioned a couple of things that the union is still doing. You know, there are still, as much as the administration hates it, there are still some civil service protections that are that federal employees have had outside of even non-union federal employees have civil service protections at the Merit Systems Protection Board. They're protected by the EEO. They're protected by the ADA, and the union, which has unique expertise in arguing these cases outside of a collective bargaining agreement. The union, AFGE, or whatever federal employee union, IFPTE, NIFI, they all have they have unique expertise in arguing for workers in these proceedings, and they have a unique, there's a unique impetus for their advocacy on behalf of those workers, unlike, say, your human capital in the agency. I know HR employees, I know human capital employees, and they're great and they want to do good, but ultimately they are there for the agency, just like human resources in a private sector company are there for the company. Ultimately, they're not there for you. The union is there for you. The union is literally funded by you. The union would not exist but for its members. And so there's a real, the whole existence of the union is meant to protect employees. And so there's still legal frameworks that workers can be protected by, and the union has unique expertise and reason to help workers, but also even above and apart and beyond the collective bargaining agreements or legal merit systems protections or EEO protections or ADA protections that workers have, the power that people have when they come together. It wasn't a law that said, they can't close these Social Security offices. It was political pressure from Social Security workers and the public on behalf of Social Security workers and Social Security recipients that got the administration to pull back from that. Same thing for the VA RIFs. It is technically within the administration's purview to RIF employees. They have to do it properly. There are processes, and the administration doesn't want to follow those processes, and that's one of the reasons why their RIFs have been so unsuccessful so far. But they can RIF employees. They decided not to do that because of the advocacy of the unions and the people. Union members having rallies in front of VA offices, union members having petitions and letter writing campaigns to congressional, to people in Congress to make them feel the pressure to try to get the administration to bend on that issue, right? And that is fundamentally, like you said, where the power of the union comes from. It's from people coming together and demonstrating their power. It's not from the legal recognition or even the merit systems or the ADA or the EEO policies. It's from the number of people that we can get on our side fighting back against these draconian policies.
That's 100% correct, and I think you've encapsulated even better than I could have. One of the things that I think is important for folks to recognize, and I want to really drill down on what you were talking about there, is let's look at, you mentioned Redstone Arsenal. Let's look at these DoD jobs. There's a ton of research that says that for every federal job, there are 6 other jobs in the community that flow from it. And so when we talk about cutting away these services, whether it's a VA, whether it's Social Security, whether it's DoD, communities realize that they're impacted very negatively by seeing the federal work go away. And there are people that rely on these jobs on top of that. There are veterans that rely on VA services. There are Social Security recipients that rely on it. Everybody's family, everybody's community is touched by it in different ways. And so, I'm in Washington, D.C. There are rallies and protests and efforts here every day, and it doesn't make a dent. It doesn't make a difference. But federal employees are in every community around the country. And when folks stand up and push back and bring their community into the fight and talk about how it will impact the people that rely on the work that we do and the communities that we're a part of, we have the power to stop almost anything because we are everywhere. And the work we do is so fundamentally important and so deeply woven into the fabric of this country. And so when federal employees find their voice and push back against these initiatives, whether they're layoffs, whether they're privatizations, whether they're all of the attacks that are coming, we can defeat all of them as long as we act like a union. Because, as you said, the union is not the legal rights that are granted to us based on the goodwill of the administration or the government. The union is the people that work in the job shoulder to shoulder together. And as long as they realize they have that power and won't let it be taken from them, because we can only give it up willingly, it can't be taken, then we can protect our jobs and all the things that are important about them. So I'm confident not only that we will win in the courts, even though as unfortunately we've had to say recently, the law isn't worse what it used to be. And my guess is we'll win and we'll lose and we'll win and we'll lose. We'll go back and forth. Everybody talks about the shadow docket the Supreme Court has, how they grant stays for injunctive relief. I think that's possible. That could happen. We could get whipsawed back and forth. But we're going to wind up winning the bigger fight about protecting our work and protecting the important mission that we do by standing together as a union.
So we've talked about, the mechanism that they're using to try to take away union rights. We've talked about the rights that federal workers do still have outside of union rights that your union can still help you enforce. And then we've talked about broadly that the power of the union comes from the members and their willingness to act. And so, if you're, if I'm a worker on Redstone Arsenal, a federal employee who has gotten this email, but who is interested in seeing the union maintain a presence on Redstone Arsenal and build and even get stronger than it was before, even in absence of recognition from the agency, what are some of the first steps that you would recommend those DoD workers do to start building a stronger union?
Another question I'm really glad you asked. I think the first thing that folks need to do is ask themselves why the agency is so interested in telling you that the union is gone. And they're not just telling people that the union is gone, but they're telling people that they should drop their union membership.
Right.
And I think the question folks should ask themselves is, why does the agency care? Because, we may spend our money at Bass Pro Shop or, at Save the Whales or, We spend our money a million different ways, even from payroll dues deduction. And the agency doesn't care. So if the union is gone, why are they worried that we're wasting money on dues? The reason that they're worried is because that money is funding the fight against the government's effort to get rid of our jobs. And so I think every time somebody looks at one of those emails, they should think to themselves, why is the agency so invested in telling me that there's no union, that I should leave the union that I'm a part of? And the answer is because they're afraid of you, and they're afraid of you standing up and defending your job against their efforts to take away your work. And I think every time you see it, instead of getting scared or confused or despairing, should piss you off, should make you really mad, because the agency is lying to you and trying to trick you into laying down and letting them fire you. That's what this is about. Right. And the fact of the matter is, there are thousands of us, hundreds of thousands of us across federal agencies, but thousands at Redstone Arsenal, who may not be listening to this radio show, who may not be hearing from their local union, who may not be talking to their stewards. And the fact of the matter is, the people that we each trust vary, because we have our own friendship groups, our own social networks. And so if you're hearing this, there are people who trust you and care about what you have to say more than they care about what I have to say or what your local president has to say. And you are the best messenger to let them know that the reason the agency is trying to get rid of your union is because they want to privatize your work and fire you. And they need to hear that. They need to hear that message. And if they haven't been a part of the union, they need to join now, because the fight is picking up. Because getting rid of the union is, in the agency's mind, in the administration's mind, the first step towards privatizing the work. And so as this fight picks up, everybody needs to union up and stand together and be a part of watching and being vigilant for those efforts so that we can fight back against it. You know, the same thing has happened, and I'll take a step aside and say, when they tried to cancel the contract for TSA, they made an effort to begin privatizing airports that had not been privatized. Right. This is a playbook. They have a plan, and the plan is to get rid of our work as federal employees. And so if you want to keep that work, you need to make sure that you're talking to folks and getting them involved and getting them to join. And again, as you mentioned, it's the rallies and the political outreach and the community outreach in each of our communities. The smaller, the more granular, the more impact it has. Because your congressional representative, who can speak up for you or not speak up for you, doesn't care what it says in the New York Times or the Washington Post, but does care what it says in the local paper, and does care what's on the evening news. And so if you rally with the folks that you know are a part of our community and push back against it, the likelihood that you'll succeed against privatization efforts or efforts to lay us off or riff us go up exponentially. It's how we win the fight. And so your job as a federal employee who's hearing this message is not only to stay in the union and to get more involved, but to talk to your coworkers and the people that trust you and care about your opinion and tell them that they need to stay as well. Because ultimately it is those connections and those conversations, those one-on-one conversations, that strengthen the union and make our power what it is. So I would say that's critical. I would also say you should go, if you're a member of Redstone Arsenal or a member of AFGE, and you mentioned there are a lot of other federal sector labor unions. Any group that represents workers is doing the important work. So this is not exclusive to AFGE, but if you're a member of AFGE, go to AFGE Solidarity Center, and there are a lot of organizing resources to teach you how to have those conversations and to help be able to speak to your coworkers and understand the things that matter to them, and help tie their concerns and the issues they care about to the fact that standing up and having a voice as an individual, as a part of a group, is the way that we reach those solutions. So I'm really glad you asked.
Dave Cann is the National Organizing Director for the American Federation of Government Employees. You can also go to afge.org/join to become a member if you're not. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to be heading into a break, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. On the other side, we are going to be talking to Bryan Stymacks, the Assistant Coordinator of Veterans Services for the International Association of Machinists. We'll also be talking about May Day and more, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at AFGE.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We just wrapped up a conversation with AFGE's National Organizing Director on why federal workers should not give up their union. They should instead increase their participation in the union and make it stronger. We're about to have a conversation about veterans benefits in the Machinists Union and more. If you'd like to call in, you can do that later in the program at 844-899-TVLR, or you can leave us a voicemail at the same number at any time. That phone number is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a text at that number or leave us a written message at tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then you should think about getting your local, your district council, your region, or your international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out as well. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class. And we're hoping this project can make a difference on that front. But we can't do it without you. So we want to thank you for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Before we get into the last week in Southern labor, I want to remind everybody, next week, Saturday, May 2nd, is the National Association of Letter Carriers annual food drive. So make sure you find non-perishable food items that you have in your pantry, or go buy non-perishable food items and put them in a grocery bag at your mailbox for your letter carrier to pick up on Saturday, May the 2nd. Saturday, May the 9th. Saturday, May the 9th. Have your non-perishable food item in a grocery bag at your mailbox, and your letter carrier will pick it up. Letter carriers, and this message goes to you no matter where you are, because everywhere in the country, every single letter carrier, all 200,000 of them, are going to be doing that on next Saturday, May the 9th. Get your non-perishable food items. Put them out at your mailbox. Your letter carrier will pick it up. This is a program that their union does every single year to try to give back to the community. Last year in Huntsville, they actually increased year over year the amount that they were able to collect. So make sure you do that. We would love to be able to see that number get even bigger this year. So we'll remind you again next weekend for folks whose letter carriers don't come early in the morning. But please go ahead, put it on your calendar right now. We're going to pause I'm going to keep talking about the food drive for another 60 seconds. 60 seconds, that's plenty of time for you to get out your phone, open up your calendar app, put non-perishable food items on Friday. That evening, make sure you get it, put it out at your mailbox. So you got plenty of time to do that now, right? You've had plenty of time. You've been able to open up your calendar app, your notes app, whatever you got, and put that in. And so everybody that's listening to the program, I don't care if you support unions. Do you support unions? Do you not support unions? Are you a Republican? You're a Democrat? You're a commie? You're a conservative? Who cares? We all want people to have food, especially, if it's not coming from the government, right? This is a private enterprise sort of deal, trying to make their community better. So we all want people to have food. It's going to go to the food bank in your area. Okay, so everybody's had time. Now, everybody that has listened to this, you're going to have a bag at your mailbox next weekend. And if you would, I would love for you to take a picture of it. Say and send us that picture. Say, hey, we learned about this food drive from the Valley Labor Report and send it to us. You can email us at info@tvlr.fm. You can send us a note, tvlr.fm/contact. I don't know if you can attach a picture to it. You can tag us on social media at Labor Reporters or the Valley Labor Report, depending on the social media platform. So there you go. Make sure that you do that. Place a bag or box of food at your mailbox. So bada bing, bada boom. Take a picture. Let us know that you heard about it here so that we can tell the letter carriers, look at how great the Valley Labor Report is for your efforts. Okay? So thank you.
We'd love that.
We would love that. Every week in the South, workers organize new unions. They bargain new contracts. They fight for good legislation and against bad legislation, and they put the boss in their place. These are some of the stories that we could find last week from April 24th to May the 1st. This is Last Week in Southern Labor. Over the last week, 822 workers in 13 bargaining units have gone public with their union campaigns. 20 workers in one bargaining unit are in a decertification campaign now. 23 workers across one bargaining unit withdrew their petition for a union election. 79 workers across 4 bargaining units unionized. 23 workers in one bargaining unit voted against decertifying their union, and 108 workers in another bargaining unit voted in favor of decertifying their union. Here's some of the details in new campaigns. 58 workers at Central Alabama Electric Cooperative in Prattville, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 443. 350 workers at Schnellick Logistics in Chattanooga, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of United Automobile Workers, otherwise known as the UAW. 10 workers at American Electric Power in Hurricane, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 978. 28 workers at Six Flags Entertainment Corporation in Arlington, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 33 workers at Novel in Memphis, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the CWA, and 11 workers at First Student, a school bus driving company in Scott City, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 600. In election results, 56 workers at Bull Moose Tube Company in Gerald, Missouri, voted 53-1 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 688. 14 workers at Starbucks in Springfield, Missouri, voted 10-4 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 108 workers at Hunt MH Shared Services in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, voted 38-56 in favor of decertifying the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 465. 4 workers at Irving Materials in Brandenburg, Kentucky, voted 2-1 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 89. In strikes and bargaining updates, transit workers nationwide are attacking private transit operators for mismanagement and a lack of training. In Asheville, the city council recently narrowly approved by a 4-3 vote a new 4-year contract with the operator of the municipal transit system, RATP Dev, for $55 million. The union representing bus drivers, the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU Local 128, says they're surprised that the company was able to retain the contract. Blue Ridge Public Radio in North Carolina quotes the local president as saying, "We had anticipated that there was no way this company was going to stay. There were just too many things that were done wrong over the past 7 years." BPR also noted that RATP Dev buses have been consistently late, on time only 62% of the time, and hasn't provided proper training to new hires. Across the country in Austin, Texas, ATU Local 1091 echoed similar concerns about training with respect to their company running the bus system, Keolis. In that city, the local union president told the city council that he got significantly more training when he started working for the transit system in the 80s than new hires do today, despite the fact that today the work is more complex in a bigger city with more construction and more detours than when he started. Seems like cities ought to just run their own transit systems for the public good rather than selling these systems to private companies to make a profit. An immediate 40% raise. That's what is in the tentative agreement covering 5,000 pilots between the Airline Pilots Association and FedEx. Additionally, the deal includes 3% annual raises beginning in 2028. The deal has been approved by the union's FedEx Master Council and now goes to a vote of the affected membership. The vote will begin on May 12th and close on June 9th. Membership voted down a tentative agreement in 2023 that contained only a 30% pay increase. In political and legislative updates, the IBEW slammed the Trump administration for the freefall of worker health and safety law enforcement, citing a report from Good Jobs First. We interviewed one of the authors of that report here on the show. The IBEW Government Affairs Director Dean Warsh said this was not a miraculous change of heart in the American managerial class that stealing our wages and damaging our bodies is wrong, he said in response to the falling enforcement of worker safety and health laws. He continued by saying, bad things don't start happening when the sheriff bad things don't stop happening when the sheriff quits. And that's what the Trump administration did. They closed their eyes and left the American worker to the wolves. The IBEW similarly decried the Trump administration's running of the National Labor Relations Board. International President Kenneth Cooper is accustomed to pendulum swings at the NLRB depending on which party wins the White House, as well as congressional action and federal lawsuits. Of recent note, a case filed by some of the nation's best-known corporations challenges the board's very existence. International President Cooper said the NLRB's ability to protect and enforce our rights as workers and union members have been under attack since the 40s, so we've got a lot of practice fighting back, but what we're witnessing now is a different type of threat, a deliberate pattern of neglect and hostility from inside the board itself. Last week contained two holidays that are deeply important to the labor movement: Workers' Memorial Day on April 28th and International Workers' Day, otherwise known as May Day, on May the 1st. The AFL-CIO released its annual Death on the Job report, which details the scale of human suffering inflicted on working people by their employers in the United States. The report relies on data that takes a while to come in, so they're always a year behind. This year's report analyzed 2024 data. It showed a decline in worker fatalities in the U.S. while anticipating a reversal of that positive trend in 2025 due to the destruction of worker safety agencies within the federal government by the Trump administration. Thousands of events were held across the country and across the South, including illegal strikes. So many educators in Durham, North Carolina, for example, called out to celebrate May Day that the district preemptively closed schools because they would not have enough staff to run the schools. Really exciting stuff. If we missed anything, let us know about your union updates at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it in next week's roundup. You can get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor in your email inbox every single week by subscribing to the newsletter at tvlr.fm. We have now on the line our next guest, the Assistant Coordinator of Veterans Services for the International Association of Machinists, IAM, Bryan Stymacks. Bryan, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, how's it going this morning? Good to be with you, Jacob.
It's great to have you, brother. Really appreciate you taking the time. You know, the IAM is really proud of their Veterans Benefits Trust. Can you talk to us about that program and what it provides to members who are veterans?
Yeah, so back in 2022, we started the application process to become a recognized veteran service organization with the VA. As recently as January 19th, 2024, in his last day in office, former VA Secretary McDonough signed that application for us, and we're the first and only labor organization that is a recognized VSO. It's never been done before, and what that lets us do is we provide our members with all kinds of benefits. We do claims from initials, appeals, supplemental claims, folks that have just filed a first claim, people that have benefits already that are looking to enhance and improve them. We do it all free of charge too. If you're a dues paying member, that's really the key benefit of our system versus other groups. When you're working with lawyers or attorneys to get some of these claims, it can be a significant cost out of the veteran's pocket. And, we want to say as a union, what we do already anyway is fight for our members, pay and benefits. And we just took that into another, realm. We said, veterans deserve the same, advocacy as our members do.
That is really cool. I guess I would have just assumed that most unions that have a lot of veterans members would have had a similar sort of thing. And most unions that have veterans, a lot of veterans as members, they'll have some sort of veteran services. But y'all having the only union recognized or the only VA recognized labor veteran service organization really makes what y'all are doing special. Can you talk about how would, if I'm a veteran, a member of the Machinists Union in Huntsville or wherever else they're listening to this, where, how do I start making use of that benefit and utilizing, the Veterans Benefits Trust within the IAM?
So one thing that we really care about, and it's not just the service that we can provide as our international, right? We love that, and we're really proud of the benefits that we provide. But I would say if you're looking to start working with us, reach out to your local chairman, reach out to your local lodge, because one of the really cool things that we envision this, plan and policy doing is drawing veterans who, maybe typically, and I know I'll just tell my story, right? I wasn't, really aware of what the union did. I wasn't, keyed up on what labor is all about and why we exist and the purpose of it. And so when we designed this, there kind of was, a little bonus to say, hey, let's get some of these veterans in to talk to our stewards, to talk to our local leaders. We enshrined it into our constitution that every local in the IM has to have a standing veterans committee. So find out who your veterans committee chairman is. Talk to him, and he can get you in contact with us. That or our information is always out on our websites, goim.org. We always want people to come and check that stuff out. But, for those that are, hesitant, the best bet is to talk to someone talk to someone local, talk to someone face-to-face. It's a principle of all union organizing, right? Face-to-face contact is the best contact. And we want our vets to have that same experience.
There are lots of veteran service organizations. There's, the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, et cetera. Is there a specific, does the fact that this VSO being a part of a union, do y'all have maybe a specific set of expertise that perhaps representatives at the American Legion or the VFW might not have in trying to get certain benefits for veterans?
As far as other VSOs, the only thing that we really have above another VSO in the benefits realm is we have full-time dedicated staff. A lot of these VSOs rely on volunteer labor. The DAV in particular relies very heavily on volunteer labor. The VFW and American Legion have had to scale back the number of NSOs that they have working for their organizations. That's the national service officers in each of those locations. They've had to kind of cut that back because without knowing where their money's coming from, and they get a lot of their funding through charitable donations and support like that. Whereas we have a set amount of, full-time employees. We just increased our staff. We have 3 full-time employees now working on veterans claims. And that allows us to dedicate, more time and more personal time with the vets who are looking for this stuff. And that's really where the real benefit takes place, is getting that one-on-one, being able to work with a veteran to develop their lay statement, tell their story, let the VA know what they have going on. And through those, pathways, we see a lot of success. Just in the 2 years that we've been really running this, 3 years, we'll say 3 years just because we were doing it kind of in a less official capacity. But we have over $5 million in back pay awarded to our members. Our members that have worked with us are receiving $1.3 million in benefits a month. So this is serious, money that we're helping these folks get. It's life changing, in that, when we have people who are always at the threat of kind of work stoppages and things like that, any kind of support that we can lend, we try and incorporate as much of what matters to us as labor as we can on the veteran side. But yeah, we are, unique in that we do bring perspective to these other VSOs too. I was lucky enough to speak before the Gathered American Legion a couple of weeks ago, and really letting some of those folks know that labor and unions aren't really someone to shy away from, and there are opportunities for these legacy VSOs who are sometimes in tougher financial straits to gain support and gain membership through coordination with the locals in their area. So we always push to try and help that too, because we want to care for all veterans, right? We have an obligation to our membership to prioritize their claims, but we see our role in the larger veteran community as something even bigger than that. And we always try and stay mindful of that aspect.
That's a good point, that working on the Veterans Committee at your local lodge for the machinists, or utilizing the veterans benefits through the Machinists Union is not an exclusive. If you do that, it's not like you can't still retain your membership in the VFW or the American Legion or whatever VSO that you were already kind of going to lodge meetings for. You can do both, and actually there can be a sort of synergy there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, that's encouraged, frankly, by us, because if we can tap into that, we always find that when we're building these committees and we're helping new members become activists, one of the hardest things is kind of event planning. And we always say, like, reach out to your local VSOs, because there's opportunity there. Those folks are already doing events. They're already creating opportunities to get out into the public and show who you are. And if you do it in a coordinated fashion, you can boost your standing as a labor organization while also helping these veteran organizations. So there's real synergy to be had if we can tap into it. And beyond that, there's just so much value in engaging in those third spaces for veterans, having places to go and talk and meet up and hang out. And it's, one of the things that we really focus on in our education sessions. We tap into, the whole health of a veteran, not just maybe the financial aspect. The finances are what brings people to us a lot of the times, the benefits. But once we have them, we really want to take advantage, and we go deep into like mental health issues. We talk a lot about, EAP, employee assistance in the workplace. How do we help veterans integrate when you get out of the service? It's hard sometimes as a veteran, who has maybe risen in the military to a position of some kind of standing, to then get out and be thrust into, the workforce. And we want to help kind of smooth some of that out and help veterans have rich, fulfilling careers in organized labor, because that's the best place to go after you leave service, right? It's not a mystery. Union workers and people in labor unions do better.
Right. We've been speaking about the VA and the fact that y'all are, the only union union VSO that's recognized by the VA. But that agency has really basically constantly been under a state of attack. Can you talk to us about the latest at the VA and some of the things that y'all are tracking at the Machinists Union?
Oh boy, it's really heartbreaking, honestly, what's going on at the VA, under this administration. And I want to preface what I'm going to say next by being really clear. It's important to us at the IAM, Veteran Benefits Services, that we really stay as nonpartisan as possible. We always try and go out of our way to pull the politics out of what we talk about, because it's important to us to never turn off a veteran in need. We want them to feel comfortable reaching out to us, and the polarizing politics can prevent a little of that. So when I say this, understand that, it's a matter of just telling the facts as they are. And the VA has absolutely been under assault, and even beyond just the VA being under attack, individual veterans lately in the last, 6-8 months have really been under attack. The VA in particular, because they want to take the benefit. The VA is expensive, right? The VA costs a lot of money, and it's fair that it does, because these veterans are folks that put their lives on the line. And, this is just honoring the other end of the oath. The veteran makes his oath to serve, up to and including the cost of his life. And we always say that we have to care for that veteran when they get back. If you're willing to send them, you got to be willing to care for them. They don't see it that way. They see the VA as a line item, and they are trying desperately to cut it. And they're also afraid of, I think, frankly, people figuring out and understanding that the VA is a model for, something like a Medicare for all. It's a health, option and a health plan that we receive from the government as a, benefit to our service. And they don't want people to see that government-run healthcare can be effective. And the VA is very effective. As recently as 2024, it had upwards of a 94% approval rating on the healthcare end. They don't want to talk about that, though, and what they like to use is the dissatisfaction around veteran benefits. And people don't really understand, even veterans don't understand all the time, that veteran benefits and veteran healthcare aren't always connected. There's actually two separate entities within the VA that deal with both. And the benefits side is complicated, and it's law, and it's funny math, and it's, people that don't believe your story, and all the frustrations that go with that. And right now, the government's using those valid frustrations as a weapon against the healthcare end. And that's dangerous for veterans because, while veterans near cities and urban areas have access to good care, they have these larger VA medical centers. The ones that are suffering are people in rural areas, veterans who might not live close to big cities, who have to travel, major distances, sometimes upwards of 100 miles to get to the nearest VA medical center. And community care helps, and access to your doctors is, a little bit of an easement on that, but not what it should be. And especially not when, centers that have been started and were being built, now we can't staff them because of these, cuts to, manpower in the VA and all these other issues. It's really a shame. And then you go into, the attacks on individual veterans, the interim ruling that thankfully veterans caught wind of early enough in the process and beat back to stop them from essentially implementing a rule that would encourage veterans not to take their meds that they're prescribed by the VA because it could negatively impact their benefit rating. They've tried to pass rulings that say, we only evaluate you at the best. We won't take flare-ups into account. We won't take your testimony of what a bad day is. So if you show up to the appointment on a good day, the VA tried to make instruction that they had to discount that, and they could only rate you on what they physically saw with their eyes, which was leading to bad outcomes. Now they're using AI to screen applications, and they're touting how great of a job they're doing at reducing the backlog. But all they're doing is denying more people. They're saying we're processing claims at a faster rate than any VA in history. And they are processing claims, but they're processing wrongful denials, which then throws veterans into the mix of having to get that lawyer and potentially losing 30% of their benefit to a scam agency. And I'm not necessarily besmirching lawyers because there are good attorneys. We are partnered really closely with NOVA, National Organization of Veteran Advocates. We work with them, and we have for a number of years. It's these claim sharks and people like that they're really scamming veterans that it seems like this VA is more than happy to allow.
Yeah, I mean, it really, it's so frustrating seeing what's being done to the VA, and the attacks on the VA aren't just happening to the services that the VA provides to veterans. It's also attacks on working conditions within the VA, and something that goes under discussed is the fact that a huge portion of VA employees, just like federal employees generally, are veterans themselves. And so, could you talk a little bit about how that, and the Machinists Union actually represents a lot of employees at the VA through their Federal Employee Union affiliate, the National Federation of Federal Employees. We just finished up a conversation with the AFGE National Organizing Director about how federal workers should respond to attacks at the DoD. But, for the broader audience, maybe a good question for you would be that, there are lots of IAM members and others who don't work for the government. So why should those people who are not directly affected by the working conditions at the VA, it's not their jobs that are being attacked, why should they oppose the anti-union and anti-worker policies of the administration at the VA? I mean, after all, the Trump administration's rationale for a lot of these policies is ostensibly that he's doing these for working people, for veterans, right? And so why should, when it comes to the working conditions of people at the VA, why should people listening, Machinists Union members and others, not support what the administration is doing?
Yeah, I'll always say this. They really do a good job at marketing on their side because they take these programs that are so odious and they're really designed to attack the American worker and attack honestly, right now, American veteran. And they spin it into this thing that's supposedly good for the taxpayer, when really what they're doing is getting cheap on veterans and letting them fall victim to the disabilities and the injuries, both physical and mental, that they received in service of this nation. And the real danger there is, honestly, it's what we talked about when you talk about staffing. We have more and more veterans. We're on the back end of, back to back to back wars, and we're now engulfed in another war in the Middle East that looks like, we don't know where the end might come, if it comes, anytime soon. And so we're going to have more veterans that are being exposed to these, whether it's environmental exposures, whether it's the traumatic kind of events that are going on in that area, whether we end up going, really boots on the ground in the theater one day and having, the more direct casualties that we're familiar with from, Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm a 2-time deployed, combat veteran in Iraq. And so those things are really important to me. I understand the challenge that when you come home, you don't always see the disability that veterans are suffering from. And if you reduce the number of workers at these facilities, you can't help more veterans with less people at the VA. You can't help more veterans with less, medical centers open because the funding was pulled mid-project. It doesn't work that way. Nothing in life works that way. You can't, the idea of doing more with less is like this weird mythology that for some reason, infiltrated our common, understanding of what we should try to do as workers. But it doesn't work that way, right? Nothing works that way. You need people in these seats. You need, expanded access and expanded care to hire, good physicians and doctors. There's caps on the pay rate for physicians at the VA. And when you think of the VA, these aren't people making, ungodly amounts of money.
Right.
These are people working, wage grade 3, 4, 5 jobs in the government, $50,000 and below, and they're still getting squeezed. I'd like to kind of touch on a point that you guys here on this podcast made a couple weeks ago when you spoke about, the need for veterans, or rather for members of these federal unions to continue to act like unions and continue to act with solidarity. And there's real value in that because the benefits that we provide, for instance, as a benefit to our members still exist. They still, are there, and we can still help, in those kind of ways. But in the federal workforce, it doesn't get talked about a lot. A lot of the benefits in, workplace conditions, whether it be pay and benefits, are won not necessarily through what we would consider traditional bargaining. They're won on Capitol Hill. They're won in lobbying legislators. So, not only should we resist these attacks, we should double down and push harder to say, we're not only are we not going to take this, we're going to do something more and show you, how wrong you are, and we're going to stand up and beat back these policies. And it's happened, right? I just brought up that interim ruling, the collective voice, and that was collective action, right? It's what we talk about in labor every day. That collective action got the VA to change the rule. And then they tried to be sneaky, and we beat them back and got them to rescind the language entirely, right? And these are ways that spirit of collective action can triumph even in the face of what feels like indomitable odds.
Right. Bryan Stymacks is the Assistant Coordinator of Veterans Services for the International Association of Machinists. Really appreciate him taking the time to talk to us about this today. You can go to goiam.org if you are a member of the Machinists Union, and you can find out more about veterans benefits there. And if you're not a member of the Machinists Union yet, and you'd like to be, you can also go to goiam.org to take the first steps towards building your union. Bryan, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to leave us with before we let you go?
Yeah, one more thing on the way out. Please, talk to the vets in your life. Have time for them. Speak to them. No one knows the battles they're fighting. And then outside of that, I do want to highlight we have a shop right now out in Lake City, Missouri, Olin. They make ammunition, and we have a lot of veterans out there. One of our coordinators we sent out to the strike line, and he was helping, enroll folks for VA healthcare. I want to shout them out, the folks out there at IM Local 778. I was on a podcast with their communicator, Nate, recently. If you guys have an opportunity, I'd say to seek them out, because they're doing really good work out there, and they're fighting for their livelihoods and their families. And I just want to take a second before I leave to shout them out and tell them to hold the line, and we'll keep supporting them as much as we can.
Absolutely, yeah. If you wouldn't mind replying to our email thread with their contact information, I'd love to get them on.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. no representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We got a great second half of the program for you today. So if you find us on Facebook and YouTube, you can continue listening to that. We're going to be talking to some Teamster zoo workers in overtime about how the zoo's trying to screw them over. And then we're going to be talking to REI workers about how they're building their union and more. So make sure you find us on Facebook and YouTube to continue watching the program. Let's get to Boss Watch, and then if we have some time, we'll talk about May Day. Every day across the South, workers are killed on the job, stolen from, discriminated against, or sexually harassed, and sometimes the employers are caught. These are some of last week's stories. This is Boss Watch. Boss Watch. In North Carolina, PepsiCo Beverages, a Delaware company operating in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, agreed to pay $270,000 and work with an accessibility consultant to settle a disability discrimination lawsuit filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. According to the lawsuit, PepsiCo hired a blind employee as a customer care advocate for its Winston-Salem call center in April of 2022. The employee requested a reasonable accommodation for his disability to allow him to access information in company computers needed to perform his job. When the company concluded it could not provide an accommodation, it fired him. The suit also alleged that PepsiCo rejected an offer by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Resources to assist PepsiCo with identifying accessibility solutions for the employee. Under the 2-year consent decree resolving the lawsuit, PepsiCo is enjoined from failing to provide a reasonable accommodation as required by the ADA. It also must work with an expert to ensure that certain software applications at the Winston-Salem facility will be accessible to individuals with visual disabilities, make periodic progress reports to the EEOC, maintain and distribute an anti-discrimination policy addressing reasonable accommodations, provide relevant training at its Winston-Salem facility, and post a notice of rights and obligations under the ADA. As alleged, the conduct would violate the Americans with Disability Act, which protects employees and job seekers from disability discrimination. So the EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of North Carolina after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. In Mississippi, the U.S. Department of Labor recovered over $120,000 in back wages for 140 workers following an investigation that found a Mendenhall-based cooling, heating, and electrical employer failed to pay workers their full wages in violation of federal law. The department's Wage and Hour Division determined that Air South LLC, operating as Air South Cooling and Heating, did not include non-discretionary bonuses when calculating overtime wages for workers and failed to issue final paychecks to 2 employees in violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Established in 2016, Air South's headquarters is in Mendenhall, and the employer also has another branch in
Greenville. And finally, in Missouri, Allied Services LLC, doing business as Allied Waste Services of the Ozarks / Republic Services of the Ozarks, which provides waste management services nationwide, will pay $200,000 to settle a sex discrimination in hiring lawsuit brought by the EEOC. According to the lawsuit, in May of 2020, Jamie Mendoza applied to work for Republic Services as a garbage truck driver based out of Springfield, Missouri. Company managers told Mendoza during her interview that female drivers had not worked out in the past and that she should carefully consider whether she wanted the position, because Republic Services would have to build a locker room with a shower for female drivers if she were hired. The EEOC alleged that when Mendoza followed up and indicated she wanted the job, the company rejected her application and hired a less qualified male for the position. The company did not have any female drivers at the time, and the suit also alleged that since at least March of 2020, Republic Services routinely failed to hire qualified female applicants for driver positions because of their sex. That alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sex discrimination in employment, so the EEOC filed suit in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Missouri after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement. If we missed a Boss Watch story, you should let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and you can get this in your email inbox as a newsletter every single week. Just subscribe at tvlr.fm. Yeah, that's it, tvlr.fm. May Day was last week. May Day is International Workers' Day. We've got a really great clip about the importance of worker solidarity and coming together across, some of these divisions that the ruling class wants us to have among one another. Shawn Fain was in Chicago on May Day, and he was interviewed by Labor on the Line in partnership with Breakthrough News. Love what they do. They do really great. So you should check out Labor on the Line. I mean, the quality of their videos are great. They've got great music post-production stuff. They got great music beds on every. I mean, it's just really, really cool. Check them out. Labor on the Line. They do really great stuff. Here's part of their interview with Shawn Fain.
They want to tell you your life sucks because of diversity, equity, inclusion. That's why you can't get a job. And if that don't work, it's because of immigration. It's some destitute, poverty-stricken human being crossing a border is taking your job. They're not taking our jobs. The labor movement, to me, really exploded out of the Great Depression, out of the worst of times when people were left behind. And you look where we are today. Wealth inequality is worse now than it was then. Workers can't afford to live, and people. It's not because they're not working. The people are working their butts off, and they can't afford to pay the rent. And so, we're at that moment again. We have the power. I mean, the only thing we have to negate all the wealth in the world is our labor, is workers shutting things down. Without our labor, nothing moves. Every time workers stand up and fight, the media and the rich want to call it class war. We're claiming class war. Well, class war's been going on for our entire lives. The rich keep taking more and more, and workers are pinched more and more. When they drive a race to the bottom, they pay poverty wages, they exploit the environment, they do everything they can. And it's so the few at the top can take all the profits. We're at a point now, I mean, even in UAW, the top 25 companies we represent, $563 million in profit in the last 10 years. They paid out 94% of that, or $530 billion in dividends and buybacks. I mean, that is everything that's wrong with this country. I mean, and then they want to say there's nothing for you. When it's time to bargain with workers, when it's time to take care of workers, there's always money for CEO bonuses, there's always money for shareholders, but there's never nothing there for the workers, and so workers are fed up. Look at COVID, what happened during such a horrible situation, the pandemic. Fast food workers, they stayed home. They said, hell with this, I'm not going to risk my life for $12 an hour. They stayed home. And we saw what McDonald's and Burger King and companies like that did. They started paying $20, $25 an hour because they needed workers. That is the greatest lesson in the power that we have as working class people. How we've got to this point is the rich keeps dividing us. They want to blame. They want to tell you your life sucks because of diversity, equity, inclusion. That's why you can't get a job. And if that don't work, it's because of immigration. It's some destitute, poverty-stricken human being crossing a border is taking your job. They're not taking our jobs. If that don't work, they want to talk about what restroom somebody uses or who somebody loves. They do all those things because they want us divided. They want us pointing fingers at each other while they continue to take all the wealth. That's what's got to change. We've got to stand together. We have the power, and that's how we got to take this back.
Sean Fain is the international president for the United Auto Workers Union. And I mean, that is that. Yeah, it's almost like I don't know what else to say because he said it all there. There is, and what he's really pointing towards is the spirit of May Day, the spirit of workers coming together and taking what is rightfully ours. All of the wealth in the world was created by workers, by people who labor. And the way that you can test that is do a thought experiment. You take a big bunch of capital, take a big bunch of money, gold bars, dollar bills, whatever, and put it in the woods. And think about, is that pile of wealth, is that pile of capital going to grow? No, it's not, actually. It's not going to grow. But what happens if you take some workers and put them in the woods? Well, guess what? You can actually create value. Right? I mean, that's how everything started because a worker, all the value in the world was created because of a worker. It doesn't come from capital, it comes from labor. And once workers realize that and take that power, then we can start to have a more equal, a more just, a more fair society. Because right now we don't. I mean, he was talking about we have higher levels of income and wealth inequality than we did in the Gilded Age. It's just completely inexcusable. There's no reason for it.
Yeah, I really appreciate his message because solidarity is how we overcome bigotry. That's our chief weapon as working people, is the solidarity that we can build together through our unity around our shared interests. Because, we say in this movement all the time, an injury to one is an injury to all. Well, you don't have to fully understand someone or fully agree with someone to have their back. And I think that's really important because the vast majority of us have way more in common with each other than we do with the oligarchs or their politicians, for that matter. Right? We as working people, as you said, we create the wealth that spins the wheels of this society. And as Brother Fain pointed out, they have used divide and conquer tactics. We are very familiar with that here in the South, right? It's been very pronounced here throughout Southern history. They use divide and conquer. They want you focused on our differences, right? Like how we look, who we love, what we worship, what we believe. They want us focused on how we're different in those certain respects and not how we're actually very similar and we have shared interests and we have shared positions in this economy and society. They want you punching sideways. They want you punching down. They don't want you looking up at the ruling class, the folks who are actually in charge, who control and own so much of everything, right? And so solidarity is truly how we overcome, because we have to have a mass movement that's big enough and diverse enough and strong enough to shake up this Southern status quo and the status quo of this country that, as Brother Fain pointed out, class war has been going on. And we, the working class, we've been losing. We've been losing for decades. We've been falling behind. Wages have stagnated. Costs have gone up. Everything costs more. Cars, education, housing, groceries, everything has gone up but our wages, our paychecks. But there's money. There's money available. It's just not going to us. Even though we're making it, we're creating it, we're making it happen, we're making it possible, it's not going to us as regular people. So that is really our task, is to build that mass movement, to build a working class unified front in this country. And, particularly here in the South, it's important because they rely on the South as a way to drag the whole country behind. They rely on the South's backwards politics. They rely on the South as a way to extract wealth. They come down here, pay us less, treat us worse, pollute our communities, bust our unions, and they know they can probably get away with it because most of the politicians are on their side. So we have to change this dynamic. And we do that through organizing, by bringing more people into the fold. We have to add and multiply, not subtract and divide, right? Addition and multiplication, that's the name of the game. So just keep organizing in your workplace, in your union. If you don't have a union yet, you need one, no matter what kind of job you have. And don't stop there. Organize your neighbors, organize your tenants, organize in the community. You know, if you belong to a church or a group or an organization, organize there. If you're on campus, if you're a student, organize your classmates, organize your family and social network, right? Have these conversations with people, bring them into the fight, because people power, massive people power, is how we've always made positive changes in this country. It's how we won labor rights and civil rights and women's rights in the first damn place. So that's what we have to revive, and that's what May Day is all about to me.
We're going to continue the program going into overtime. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We got a great second half lined up for you. We're going to be talking to some Teamsters, talking to some REI workers, and more. We'll also take calls, 844-899-TVLR. We'll go ahead and open the phones during the break, and really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you don't follow us online at Facebook or YouTube or wherever else at the Valley Labor Report, and keep listening to the program or watching the program, we really appreciate this time that you've spent with us this week, and we'll see you next week. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Well, in the host.
Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party explorer. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, now broadcasting across the Mason-Dixon line in Chicago and in Minneapolis, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail or give us a call, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a text at that number or send us a written message at tvlr.fm/contact. We have on the line now Jana Brown calling in. Jana is the General Counsel for the Teamsters Local 727. Jana, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Really appreciate it and looking forward to the conversation. You know, I saw a couple of press releases from Local 727 about this, and workers at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago have rejected the company's last, best, and final offer, and they voted to authorize a strike. Of course, you know, nobody wants to go on a strike if they don't have to. And so could you tell us a little bit about how we got here and why the members rejected the company's offer?
Certainly. So I can tell you that the parties have been in bargaining since February. The zoo has come to the table on each and every session, not in good faith and not willing to reach a deal. We've filed nearly a dozen. At my last count, I believe it was 12 ULPs, which are unfair labor practice charges. And as you know all too well, it's all but impossible to reach a deal at the table when one party isn't willing to work to achieve that end. The second piece is that the final offer that the company presented itself is very problematic. They presented a last, best, and final offer, and while we've got, you know, you are talking to the General Counsel, so I got to speak a little bit about the legality here. We have a ULP pending on the legality of that offer, but the terms itself also fall incredibly short of what is needed to reach a deal here. They don't address the top key issues of healthcare, wages, and understaffing. Their final offer, which we confirmed yesterday in our final day of bargaining again, does in fact remove the current union healthcare benefits for all of the workers, and the company's proposed no plan in its place. It doesn't include fair and reasonable wage increases, which honestly their wage offer amounts to less than an average of 3.7% a year over 4 years. It doesn't address understaffing, and it includes a number of concessionary proposals. So that's sort of the quick and dirty of how we got here.
You know, especially in an environment like this, you know, cost rising, inflation looks like it's going to begin creeping up again. It's difficult to imagine that the zoo, you know, thinks that they would think that this was an offer that would be acceptable.
Yeah, it's quite puzzling, and I wish I could tell you why they're putting this offer forward. If I had a magic wand, I'd probably be an even better negotiator than I am now. But at the end of the day, they're pushing a narrative about the expense of this proposal. But the reality of the situation is that the health care that the zoo pays for its non-union employees, including management, is far more expensive than what the union is proposing. So they seem to want a discount for union healthcare that they can't even get for themselves on the open market. It's just unreasonable and frankly unrealistic. I can tell you that there's been changes in zoo leadership.
Just to underscore really quickly, you mentioned that the healthcare was more expensive, and I want to make sure that the audience knows that when you say more expensive, you are meaning, if I'm understanding correctly, more expensive for the company. It would be more expensive for the company to offer their worse health care that they're giving their non-union employees and that they're giving their management, which you've also said in a press release, I believe, would amount to it would be more expensive for the employer on the employer side, and it would obviously be more expensive on the employee side. You've said that it would amount to the workers having to pay $3.50 an hour every hour that they work for this worse health care program, that healthcare and health insurance that costs more for the employer and the employee than the Teamsters healthcare that comes at no cost to the employee and is cheaper for the employer?
You hit the nail on the head. That is exactly right. Right now, these hardworking employees enjoy cost-free health care, which means they don't pay into the premium, and the company pays for it on their behalf. And what the zoo is paying for that is less, but it costs the zoo to offer premium coverage, which the employees would have to pay for, to its non-union and management employees. It's a lose-lose on both sides of the aisle, which is very unique and doesn't come up often in bargaining, but that is the state of affairs.
That is just wild. I mean, are they saying, is the zoo in like financial, I mean, are they saying that they're going to go bankrupt or something? I mean, what's the, or I don't understand. I guess I it's difficult for me to understand what's going on here.
Your puzzlement and bewilderment is exactly how we feel. I can tell you that, sharing that data point with you, it's clearly not just about the money. Like I said, they've had some leadership changes. I don't know if the folks at the top just aren't making the right decision. The zoo certainly can't be crying poor because they're paying its CEO in base salary just under $700,000 a year. They pay $1.5 million for 4 leaders in a single year in just base compensation. That doesn't include these expensive benefits I just spoke about. It doesn't include retirement, which is all caked on top of that base salary. So there's money to be had. There's money coming in. It's just about how the zoo's prioritizing it. And it seems that they've dug their heels in and have decided that they don't want to prioritize it to the workers that actually make the magic at the zoo happen, and would rather funnel it to the executive offices who get to sit in cozy offices and frankly don't do anything on the day in and day out animal care.
And so they presented this last, quote unquote, last best and final. And as well as I do that these last best and final offers are never actually the last best and final. We went through this here in our area when the Volkswagen workers at Chattanooga were in their contract negotiations. They had a last best and offer from the last best and final offer from the company that lo and behold, a few months later, they come back with an offer that's significantly better to try to avoid a strike. And so it's really more of a political term, a pressure tactic on the part of the company, this titling an offer the last best and final. But they offered something that they called that. Your membership that included terrible health care that would have been more expensive for the employee and the employer, inadequate raises, and a number of other concessionary employees. The membership voted it down. They also voted to authorize a strike. And you're now in a position where the contract expired on Friday night, so workers can go on strike at any time now. But before the contract expiration, y'all had bargaining on Friday, and you talked a little bit about what happened, but is there anything else that happened at the table on Friday in the hours leading up to the contract expiration that you feel like would be valuable for the audience to understand?
Certainly. So really, to add to the strangeness that has become this bargaining, the party's last scheduled bargaining session, you're right, Jacob, was for yesterday. The contract expired at noon. And on Thursday afternoon, late in the afternoon, so the day before we're scheduled to meet for our last day of bargaining, the zoo informed the union that they were switching out their lead negotiator. Their lead negotiator was from a management side firm. That firm has represented the zoo in my entire tenure with the local and probably for years prior. They've hired the new firm of Seyfarth and Shaw, a firm that I'm sure many will recognize. They're leaders of many anti-union campaigns. They've switched them out for that lead negotiator and informed us of that the day before we were set to meet. So that signaled to us that getting a deal was going to be even harder on Friday, because now you've got a new negotiator who has to get himself up to speed before he can really do anything meaningful. In the press releases leading up to Friday, the zoo had said to the public and to the members that they were going to come Friday to bargain and reach a deal. They knew that the offer had been voted down, so we expected actual bargaining to occur. That's not what happened Friday. What happened Friday was the zoo showed up. They made absolutely zero changes to their final offer. They didn't make movement on a single proposal. They proposed no solutions on reaching a deal. The only thing that was new was their negotiator. Regardless of that, we did, which is what, these workers do every day, and we continue to do hard work, and we remain steadfast on reaching the deal, even though they showed up to do apparently nothing. We presented a bare bones proposal, even though it was technically the company's turn to go and present, and with what they had promised and put out in press releases. Since they did nothing, we presented a bare bones proposal, and our proposal would settle all the issues. It would come with the recommendation of the committee to pass it and wrap everything up. I don't have my notes in front of me, but my recollection is that it took them less than an hour to reject that proposal, and they proposed nothing in response, and bargaining ended.
Adam Keller is my co-host, and he just finished contract negotiations with a company, and he's also, he's been in the labor movement for over a decade and talked to a lot of people in contract negotiations. Adam, it's not common for the employer to switch out their lead negotiator 3 hours before a contract expires, is it?
I've literally never heard of that. That is a new one for me. So now y'all are way more experienced than I am over there. But wow, that's something new, and definitely not a good sign.
And a new negotiator who comes to the table with literally nothing new to offer. That's
right.
Bizarre.
Disrespectful is
Other
how
than
I would
himself,
feel.
Disrespectful, shocking, surprising, all the things. I will tell you this. It seems that from the union's perspective, the zoo seems to be playing some sort of a game here. And what they're discounting in that process is that this isn't a game for the union. It's not a game for the hardworking employees. They didn't take this strike authorization vote lightly. As you said earlier, Jacob, nobody wants a strike. They're being forced into this by the company's own actions, and it's going to take someone at the zoo realizing that that's the case before the zoo is going to do anything to remedy it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious how the workers on the ground are like what are they saying to you and to the other negotiators, if there are any? How are they reacting to this? I think what we would all describe as disrespect by the employer. And then, with the contract expired, like we said before, workers can now strike at any time. I mean, do you anticipate? Does the union anticipate at this point the workers needing to go out on strike?
Yeah, listen, I don't call the shots on when the workers, when the strike is called. That is reserved for the leaders at the union. But I can tell you that right now, as we're talking, those hardworking employees are still reporting to work. I can also tell you, and you're completely correct, Jacob, that the no strike provisions of the contract have expired. So legally, they can strike at any time. But the union is also, this is a very unique contract and a unique unit in the sense that they provide care for animals. So the union is still working with the zoo on the zoo's animal care plan for the essential care that the animal care specialist will provide in the event of a stoppage. Those meetings over that care plan are scheduled to continue on Monday. But, I can tell you in terms of going back to your question of what the group is saying and what the members' reaction has been. I wish there was a better word for disappointment. I think that it's always upsetting and disappointing when the employer you've spent your entire adult life working for shows themselves to be someone who doesn't ultimately have your best interest in mind. This isn't a Fortune 500 company. This is a nonprofit zoo. So you usually don't see that type of dynamic in this atmosphere. But what we've seen at the bargaining table and the fact that we have a dozen ULP charges pending tells a very different story. And I think that reality to the employees has been incredibly upsetting. But I'll tell you what, they're some of the strongest workers I've seen. They overwhelmingly voted to authorize this strike. There was no doubt in their minds. And they are one of the most solid and strongest groups I've seen, and they're ready to fight for what they need.
Jana Brown is the General Counsel for the Teamsters Local 727. Jana, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this morning. Please keep us updated, and best of luck as y'all continue negotiations.
Thank you.
We got a lot of guests today. We have another one lined up, and on the line, they're calling in from a 202 area code. This is Sam Wirt. Sam is an REI Union member from Berkely, California, here to talk to us about the momentum that's growing at the REI Union. You know, they just actually announced a new campaign in San Diego. If those workers do elect to unionize, they would be the 12th unionized REI store. Really exciting. So, Sam, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks for having me, Jacob. I'm excited to be here.
Workers at your store organized a couple of years ago now, and you know there are some updates that we're excited to discuss with you. But can you remind people why REI workers at your store and across the country started organizing in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a national campaign. So I'm out here in the Bay Area at the Berkely store, and we have stores all across the country, from coast to coast and places in between. And as you can imagine in that situation, there's myriad reasons why people would join. You know, Soho kicked us off with the whole gamut, really, from, you know, a store in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country where people are struggling to make ends meet, to abusive managers who would do things like lock employees in a closet to dress them down while shouting at them, and to protecting our queer and people of color, like members of our units, from discrimination, both from customers and from management. You know, all the usual things you would expect that workers are facing in hard times like these. But REI is also kind of an interesting case because it sort of attracts a certain type of person. You know, I started REI when I was, after I had just moved out to California with my wife. I had been unemployed during COVID. This was in 2020, and had, you know, as you can imagine, a lot of financial hardships from that. And when the economy started opening up again, I saw a job posting at REI and was really excited for the opportunity to work for a place that billed itself as a co-op. I thought that this would be a place where I'd be able to put my skills to the use as someone who's been, you know, camping, backpacking, kayaking, all those sorts of things my entire life. And the co-op model really appealed to me as somebody who wanted to be able to put those skills to the use and have a real say over how my workplace functioned. And what I found when I got there, you know, you start work, go up to a manager, ask them, oh, so what about this whole co-op thing? And the answer that you get is unsatisfying to just about anyone. And you find over time that the idea of it being a co-op is a farce. You know, I don't even like to refer to it as a co-op anymore. I refer to it as the company, because it has no democratic processes that can be actually enforced. You know, they've, throughout the course of this union campaign, they've even unilaterally changed bylaws to get around various agreements and things like that. So that was really disparaging, or really made me distraught, because that was such a big aspect of why I came on, that at that point for me, one of the big reasons why I unionized was to have that sort of democratic input on my workplace. You know, we're the ones who come in every day and stock the shelves and help our customers and have the knowledge that they need to get them the help that they need when they're trying to get out into the outdoors and the things that we love. And if we don't have the input to give to people to try and make our workplace the best that it can be, then we're going to try to build those structures ourselves. And a union is the best way to do that.
You know, you mentioned that REI attracts a certain type of person. They kind of bill themselves as a certain type of company, a more progressive, a more fair sort of company. And I'm reminded of when the REI Union campaign started, they did a union-busting podcast that began with a land acknowledgement. So I think that that kind of speaks to the sorts of people who like run REI. You know, they're willing to do these sort of performative kind of liberal progressive gestures while having while struggling a lot to really relinquish any sort of power and control and allow their workers, the people who make REI run, to have a voice on the job, which is what you're asking for, which would be, that's the progressive and the right and just thing to do, is to allow your workers to have a voice on the job and to not fight them as they're trying to get that voice on the job. But it seems like they're not super interested in that. And so, that they're doing a whole union busting podcast, kind of is part of the story about how they have responded. But I'm curious, what are some of the other episodes of management's response to this campaign that really stick out to you over the few years that y'all been organizing, and then in particular anything recently?
Yeah, I mean, they've run their own gamut of tricks and deceptions and bullying over the years, from corporate on down. That the example that you brought up there, that's one. Like, I have people who are basically unfamiliar with the campaign, like, coming up and talking to me, and it's always funny how much that exact example comes up where Eric Arts went on that podcast. But by and large, what we've seen here in the last 9 months or so of when we've been at the national table is that management's response, REI Corporate's response, and their corporate lawyers from Morgan Lewis, has by and large to be deeply unserious. They are not engaging in what anyone would refer to as good faith bargaining. Like, the last proposal that we were given at the table, that is ultimately going to be kind of the stamp we put on the boycott as we're moving forward, was a joke. They are attempting to give us less than what non-union stores are giving. They're pretty open about it, and now at the end, we've kind of got the lines written. We know what we're facing, and we're moving forward with it. They have just been completely intransigent when it comes to getting us anything approaching a real deal that our members can ratify. Sometimes we've tried to remind them of the fact that when we're sitting there at the table trying to get a deal, our members have to vote on this. It has to be something that we can go back to the table and people can cast their ballot for. And this isn't a decision that we're making lightly to go out on a boycott like this. All of us across the country are highly invested in making our workplace work, not just because this is something that pays our bills, not because we need our stores to stay open so that we can continue to be employed, but also because we fundamentally enjoy and believe in what we're doing. And when management responds by suggesting that we're somehow worth less than the rest of our coworkers around this country, it really does put into perspective just what we're going to have to do to make them see that we're not going to be turned away. We have 11, soon to be 12 stores with us, and they're playing around at the table. They're like, their last proposal that they sent us being like a joke, like chuckling about it as you're coming in, really sets the terms for what we've got going forward. And from the 15th to the 25th, with this boycott and everything, I think they're going to find that our supporters are ready to stand with us.
You mentioned that the REI Union is trying to do more to put a little bit of pressure on REI to get them to, bargain in good faith, to give y'all a proposal that you can accept. What are some of the things that the union is doing to try to increase that pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got like I just mentioned, we've got a boycott going from the 15th of this month to the 25th. It's during our anniversary sale that we hold yearly. It's our biggest sale of the year, right up there with the holiday season. And we're encouraging all of our customers and members to not shop during that time. That's our kind of step one, because at a certain point, we have to make REI recognize that our collective power is enough to make them feel the squeeze. We would prefer to simply hash out a deal, but at the end of the day, we recognize that sometimes you're going to have to push a little bit harder. going along with that, we're talking to anyone who will listen. We're letting people know what the reality of working at a place like REI is like. For instance, I was just talking to a reporter about REI's rollout of AI and the financialization of the company. So REI is seemingly, like everyone, even as it seems to be precipitously leaning off a cliff, seems to be jumping on the AI bandwagon. And it's really, it's honestly crazy at a place like REI, where the entire conceit of the company is that it's a place where you go to get expert advice from people who have experience in the activity you're looking to get into. And REI's plan is to integrate AI into this process. And I'm sorry, our customers and our members are not looking to get advice from Claude, thinking that, unaware of whether or not it could be hallucinating in the purportedly expert advice that it's supposed to be giving them, we don't want to be in a situation where our customers and our members are getting that sort of experience when where they're coming here is to talk to us, workers.
Right.
And we're trying to get people aware of these sort of internal changes that REI is making, the route that they're putting forward as like kind of the roadmap for the company, and the sort of cuts that we can see coming. REI rolled out this, will be rolling out this series of cuts on July 1st. And we really see that as an opportunity to make our customers and members aware that this is what they're doing. Because when people like come in and talk to us, one of the most common things that they say is, this is like such a great place. You must love working here. It's awesome to be a part of this. And I'm sure like you're going out and doing your activities all the time. And, it's always a little painful to disabuse them of that notion.
Right.
That working here isn't all that it's made out to be, that REI is cutting vacation and sick time accrual, that they're cutting starting wage benefits for workers. And any way that we can get that out to people through boycotts, through interviews like this. We're also running a campaign to get our customers to reach out to their state and local attorneys general to really attack the idea of REI being a co-op. We want to bring transparency to what is a actual legal designation. A co-op should have to be a co-op in actuality, not merely just a financialized institution that's trying to hawk credit cards. And if we can get some legal pressure on them to see that their co-op structures exist in name only, then that's another avenue that I think would put a lot of pressure on them to bring them back to the table.
Sam Wirt is an REI Union member from Berkely, California. We've been talking about some of the ways that the REI Union is increasing pressure on the company. You can go to ourrei.com to learn a little bit more, to pledge to boycott during their sale from the 15th to the 25th, May 15th to the 25th, and get involved in any of those other activities. But the most important thing that workers at REI can do to increase pressure on the company is by joining the union. And that's the way that you're going to be able to get more and better things from the job, is by being a part of the union. So if I'm an REI worker that's listening, how can I join the union? How can I help build the REI Union?
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to us, to bring new people to the party. And, to be honest, I always like to let people know about the real struggle that's involved with it. Because I always joke with people that I've now spent more time on this campaign than I did in high school. So the fight is real, but I don't think people should be daunted by that, because on a very fundamental level, I think it's worth pointing out that REI is not done with their cuts. These are people who are determined to make REI the leanest, most cutthroat outdoor gear retailer on the market today. And if you want to protect what you have, the only way to do that is through a union contract and the protections that it comes with. The only way to make our company, this company, better, to turn it into something approximating, at the very least, a real co-op with democratic values, is to start from the ground up. And workers can only do that ourselves. You know, no one's coming to save us at this point. It's easy to look around at the world and despair, but frankly, when we walked out of that negotiating room this past week, where they presented their joke of an offer, none of my coworkers were feeling despairing. None of us were feeling demoralized. REI set the terms for this fight, and we're ready to have it. Throughout the last week, as we were putting our heart and soul into, frankly, insulting offers on us for the sake of getting a deal, like the sort of deals we were putting to them to get a contract, to make progress, to negotiate in good faith, were frankly insulting to us. And for REI to respond with literal jokes makes it abundantly clear how deeply unserious about this process they are. And if they're that deeply unserious about dealing with 11, soon to be 12 unionized stores standing in together, showing no divisions, winning 14 elections in a row, 11 union petitions, and 3 deserts, like, I'm sorry, we have to point at the scoreboard. And REI is in denial about what that means. And so when we look at the rest of our coworkers across this country at the non-unionized stores, it's very, very easy to see why they would join us, because we have all these protections and REI is still playing this dirty game. And we know because people talk to us. We talk to workers all across the country, and we hear from them that they're facing all of the same struggles that we do, while not being able to coordinate with the larger movement. So my message to my coworkers all across this country is that fight's just getting started, and we're not demoralized. We're not giving up. We're ready for it. Over the course of the last week, every time that we got a proposal ready to send them, we went back and we started planning for this boycott, because we had a sneaking suspicion that REI was not looking for a deal, and we were gearing up for the fight. So the fight's not stopping here. It's coming in, and any reinforcements we can get are just icing on the cake. So we would love to have more of our coworkers join us.
Sam Wirt is an REI Union member in Berkely, California. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Really appreciate you hopping on and talking to us. People need to know, and I think that they're going to be happy to support us when they hear the news.
Yep, absolutely. Looking forward to hearing more. We got another guest on, I believe. Have we got Frank in the Zoom? Yes, we do. Frank Bardak is a labor activist, sort of a historian, and an author of the book Trampling Out the Vintage, Cesar Chavez and the Two Souls of the United Farm Workers. Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Sorry about the late notice, but I really appreciate you sticking in here with us and really excited for the conversation. You're muted, I believe, Frank, on your end. Frank, I think you're muted. Okay, yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yes, it's great to have you, and really looking forward to it. So, you know, your name came across our radar from Labor Notes. You did an interview with them a couple of weeks ago about the sexual assault and rape allegations against Chavez, and we want to talk to you about that too. But, you know, first for our audience, since our audience is a little bit kind of broader than, you know, most people who read Labor Notes are going to be kind of, you know, union partisans and people who've been in the movement for a while. And so they're going to have a little bit more knowledge maybe about kind of the background than people just tuning into us on the radio. So can you give us a little bit of you know, Cesar Chavez 101? Why did these allegations hurt so many so deeply, and why was he before this and really even still such an important figure in the farm worker movement?
Well, Cesar Chavez, and actually, in his mother and father called him Caesar, and everybody called him Caesar, even though it's spelled Cesar and more melodious Spanish pronunciation. But he was known as Caesar. He was an early farm worker organizer in the 1960s. He was the head of an organization. He and Dolores Huerta and Gilbert Padilla were the head of an organization called the National Farm Workers Association, which was a organization of California farm workers. And in 1965, there was a strike of grape pickers in Delano, California, and the NFWA decided to join that strike, even though they were dubious about the outcome of it. But they joined it in solidarity with their Filipino farm workers. The Filipino farm workers were actually in a different organization. And that strike eventually lost, as the NFWA thought it would. And Chavez subsequently led a boycott of table grapes, which became the most successful boycott in American history, and forced upon the grape owners the most substantial contracts ever won by farm workers, including seniority rights, a hiring hall, grievance procedures, all the things of a regular union contract that farm workers had never had before. So Chavez was the instigator and the leader and the main energy behind that boycott. Thousands of people participated, but Chavez was clearly the leader of it. And through his leadership of that boycott, he became a national hero.
Right, right. And, when people learn about Chavez in history classes, I think even in Alabama, we had maybe one lesson that included him. That's really kind of where it leaves off. And so, we'll talk about the specifics of the allegations in a moment, but, his story doesn't end there. And, people who are more familiar with the labor movement are going to know a little bit more of what happens next. But, what happens next makes the allegations and the revelations a little bit less shocking, because it's known by a lot of people that Chavez had a lot of problems as a leader and amassed and concentrated sort of dictatorial power within the UFW. You talk about that in your book, Trampling Out the Vintage, Cesar Chavez and the Two Souls of the United Farm Workers. What were some of those ways that he did concentrate power and abuse that power, even aside from the most recent revelations?
Well, during the boycott, the National Farm Workers Association became an affiliated union of the AFL-CIO. It was first an organizing committee, the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee, and then subsequently it was a chartered union. However, the chartered union was very peculiar because it didn't allow for locals or any kind of elections by the rank of file to the union staff. Now, the NFWA originally was a volunteer organization, and everybody who served in that organization owed their jobs to Cesar Chavez. People were paid $5 a week and expenses. But Cesar okayed every appointment, and everybody in the organization owed their job to him. So when they became a union, that continued. Rather than arranging for locals or any kind of way for farm workers to elect their staff and their leadership, it continued to be a staff organization where everybody on the staff owed their job to Cesar. this was not just a theoretical proposition, because throughout the early history of the UFW, there were periodic purges within that organization that made absolutely clear that you owed your job to Caesar. So it was a highly undemocratic structure for a regular union. Even given the undemocratic reality of a lot of American unions, this was built into the structure of the union. So that's a big part of the story.
And, by setting the UFW up, even once it became a union, as being uniquely anti-democratic, I mean, it's almost difficult to understand how that was even legal. But what were some of the things that he did after he amassed that power that really, after the strike, the power of the UFW really declined, and I think a lot of people point to the lack of democracy as a reason, as at least a partial. I mean, there are many reasons, as there are with anything, right? But as a partial reason that some of the power got sucked out of the UFW. I mean, is that kind of your understanding of it?
Well, generally, yes. I mean, there's a very particular story, of course. There's always very particular stories in anything. But after the union won the grape contracts, and then there was a strike in the Salinas Valley. The grape contracts were in the Central Valley, and among vegetable workers as opposed to grape workers. And that strike actually won a contract. And but even when they won that contract, the contract did not provide for a local in that area. So people were still led by this staff that was owed their jobs to Caesar. Then in 1979, there was one of the biggest strikes in California agricultural history in that same place in Salinas. And that strike was led by farm workers and resulted in even more contracts in the vegetable industry. And during that strike, during the negotiations which solved that strike, there was a provision that workers could elect their own representatives. And the idea of Caesar and the staff was that those representatives would help with contract enforcement. The people who won those positions were the people who had led the strike. People voted for their strike leadership in those positions of what came to be called the paid reps. Now, the paid reps were something very different inside the UFW because they owed their jobs to the rank and file rather than to the Cesar Chavez. And they had their own ways of doing things which Chavez didn't appreciate. And the most significant difference between Chavez and the paid reps was at this time, the UFW had half the vegetable industry, and the paid reps believed that in order to secure their union, and they thought of it by this point as their union, in order to secure their union, they had to organize the rest of the industry. So they set about organizing the rest of the industry. Chavez didn't want them to do that. He didn't want them to do that because basically he didn't want more contracts, because the contracts, when people had contracts, they had grievances, they had problems, and it made more problems for him. And by this time, he really wants to organize the boycott. He's a boycott organizer, not a farm worker organizer. So he prohibits the paid reps from doing other organizing, and they ignore him. They continue to do it anyway. And this division at a convention becomes apparent to everyone, and Chavez, in fact, fires the paid reps, even though he didn't have a right to do so because he hadn't appointed them. They'd been elected. And the growers in the early 80s observed that convention and could see that the union was divided. And then they made an anti-union push against the union. And by that time, the union was broken and divided and couldn't fight back. That's briefly the story of what happens after the grape strike.
Right. And so, coming up to today, can you remind people, in short, what some of the revelations about Cesar Chavez were in the New York Times and in some of the subsequent reporting?
Well, it was not a particularly big surprise. It's unfair to say it was an open secret. It was not an open secret, Chavez's abuse of Ana, but there had been an accusation by a person in the leadership who was the stepmother of Ana Murguia. Kathy Murguia, her stepmother, had accused Chavez of abusing her stepdaughter. And people had chosen not to look into it. People didn't want to hear about it. They just said, "Oh, Kathy's crazy." But now, why they didn't want to look into it, I think, is clear from what I've said before here. The first reason they didn't want to look into it was that Chavez was a hero and the authentic leader at that time of the farm worker movement. He was also a celebrity. In addition to that, and celebrities have a lot of immunity from these kinds of accusations, as we've come to learn. In addition to that, the structure of the organization was such that there was no really independent voice inside the staff. So Kathy's accusations just were put aside until the New York Times recently came out with this evidence.
And you've made the point that democracy within a union, which the UFW did not have, is a really essential. I think the phrase would be necessary but not sufficient tool against these sorts of abuses, both the sexual abuses and also just the general abuse of leadership and the the abuse of the staff and the lack of workers being able to decide the direction of their organization under Chavez. Can you talk about? I think it's pretty intuitive, but can you just talk a little bit about why that is the case? Why would democracy hamper a leader's ability to get away with things like this? Especially if, the reason that a lot of this hadn't come out in an official way was that he was so popular. It wasn't even necessarily, especially at this point, for the last 15, 20 years, it's not as if Chavez had a particular amount of power himself. It was his popularity that people were concerned about. And so how would democracy have put a check on his power?
Well, I think it's implicit in what I've said before. Because everybody in the union owed their job to Cesar, it was not really possible to criticize him even about something like this. Now, there is another complication, Jacob, and that is that when the UFW was on the rise during the boycott, eventually they did have about 65,000 members. Today they have very, very few. The UFW became the center of the demands of the growing, emerging Chicano movement. So the Mecha organizations, which were on the university campuses and college campuses in California and across the United States, mostly in California, they had central demands. And their first demand was Chicano studies at the university. And their second demand was support of the UFW. So Chavez became also an authentic leader of the Chicano movement. And as a matter of fact, it was within the UFW that people started calling themselves, instead of Mexican Americans, Chicanos. So within that kind of movement, within the Chicano movement, Caesar is also a great hero, an authentic hero, I think, more within the Chicano movement than within the labor movement. I don't think anybody is an authentic hero in the labor movement that designs a structure like the UFW and actually fights with the elected leadership of the rank and file. But he is the authentic hero of the Chicano movement. So that's another complication in this story.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes, it does. Somebody responded to your interview in Labor Notes, and people can check it out. You talk about some of the, we talked about some things that you didn't talk about in the Labor Notes interview, and they talked about some things that we're not going to get to. And so, there's value in reading that interview as well. And somebody wrote in with things that you and I spoke on the phone that you the broad strokes you don't disagree with, which is that democracy, while necessary, is not sufficient. Democracy alone is not going to stop, leadership abuses, and there are opportunities that people can take even within a democratic environment. And so what are some of the other guardrails that you think are valuable for organizations like the UFW and like the rest of the labor movement to think about including, to make sure that above and beyond democracy, that leaders are not able to do these sorts of things in the future?
Well, it's a tough question, Jacob. I don't know that I know the answer to that. What else? I mean, the whole celebrity culture is at fault here. Because it was not just lack of democracy in the UFW, it was the fact that he was a celebrity. And celebrities get away with a lot. And that's a broad cultural question, which goes beyond any kind of organizational question. And so I don't know what you and I or what the labor movement can do about that. I mean, you want to, in general, I'm all for leaders. I'm not against leadership, but in general, you want your leadership not to become something different than what you are. And over and above what you are. You want your leadership to express what you are and to have some vision, maybe perhaps beyond which you have. I mean, after all, the wisdom of a leader of an international takes in all of the various regions and locals, which person in a particular local can't really know about. So you have to respect that, but you don't want to put your leadership on a pedestal and make them a celebrity beyond criticism. That's all I can really say to that.
There was an interesting article, I don't know if you've seen it, by Anna Avendano. She wrote a book about sexual harassment in the labor movement called Solidarity Betrayed: How Unions Enable Sexual Harassment and How They Can Do Better. She had a couple of recommendations. I mean, one which seems like a pretty no-brainer, and it actually kind of surprised me that these do exist. But she said that unions should release current and former staff members from NDAs that cover sexual harassment, assault, or related conduct. I think that sounds pretty reasonable. It's kind of surprising that unions have NDAs regarding sexual harassment. And then she also recommended, subsequent to that, having a structure to hear survivor stories. And she pointed to one model that the labor movement could take seriously is a truth and reconciliation process. And so she talks a little bit about how you might be able to structure that and talk to speaks to some precedents. So, that's something that people could look to, particularly if they're in union leadership and thinking about, how to structure their employment situation, how the union acts as an employer. I think those are some good practices and to try to implement if you're in a position to do so. As we're wrapping up, is there Are there any
seem reasonable to me? Both of those seem very reasonable to me. Anyway, you wanted to wrap up.
Yeah, no. Did you have anything else about? I mean, we're not pressed for time or anything. Did you have anything else on those, or but yeah, I mean, like you said, I think they sound pretty reasonable.
Yeah, very reasonable. I'm very surprised that unions have those statements at the beginning that you have to sign up about.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it really surprises me.
Right. Yeah, no, it surprises me too. And she also talked in that article about how, there are some NDAs that unions have that, at least facially, even violate the NLRA because they prohibit, they prohibit workers from talking about their working conditions, workers for unions from talking about their working conditions within the union as an employer. And that's illegal because the NLRA expressly gives people permission to talk about their working conditions, and NDAs that violate that provision of the NLRA are officially null and void. Like they don't, the NLRB has ruled against them in the past. It's unclear what the current NLRB would say about that. But so Jacob and Frank agree with her on this, and so I'm sure we'll be able to get the ball rolling on that.
I would like to say that in defense of unions, this is not a problem particular to unions.
Yes.
This is in the culture in general, the celebrity culture, and also patriarchy in general. So yes, there are bad situations inside unions, but it's not particular to unions.
And that's such an important point to, I sometimes I do take it for granted that our audience is understanding of that, but it's always worth underlining it when we get an opportunity that, to the extent that there are problems within the labor movement, the labor movement is made of people. I was talking about this in a training that I did yesterday. Unions are human institutions, and they're as flawed as the humans that make them up, right? You're going to have that with anything. And it's basically any problem that you can point to is going to be a smaller scale within the labor movement, because you do have some of that democratic accountability that you don't have within a corporation. You don't get to elect your boss, and so they have a lot more power over you than your union president does, for example.
Exactly.
So the good thing to underline there. And so yeah, as we're wrapping up, are there any other lessons that you think are important for rank and file unionists or for leaders to take away, both from the recent revelations about Chavez's abuse of young women and girls, but also, the broad kind of his stewardship of the decline of the UFW and the way that movement, which was so strong and powerful and really captured the nation's attention, declined so steeply. What lessons should people be taking from his story?
Oh, I don't know, Jacob. I don't know that there are any lessons independent of the story itself, which is a very sad story. And, I guess it highlights the fact that the strength of any union is not in its supporters, which was the boycott, but is in the rank and file workers. That doesn't mean that the support of supporters is not important, but the essential strength of a union is in an educated and committed rank and file.
I think that's a great
slogan, but
no, I think it's great. I like it. Frank Bardak is an author of the book Trampling Out the Vintage Cesar Chavez and the Two Souls of the United Farm Workers. Also taught me, I thought it was Cesar Chavez. That's how I was saying it before all of this started. And then I was listening to podcasts, people calling him Cesar Chavez. And so I was like, oh, I must have been pronouncing it wrong. But Frank corrected me, and I was right the first time. So there we go. Frank, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in or leave a voicemail. Speaking of voicemails, we've got one. Let's go ahead. Let's play clip 2. We got a voicemail last week.
Hello, my name is John, and I am a city letter carrier out of the Lexington, Kentucky area. And you guys were asking us to call in and explain why you listen to the Valley Labor Report. And my main reason for listening is just being a member of the labor movement. I want to look for more information as far as what's going on, other resources that are out there, because sometimes I don't even know where to begin to look for information. and I came across you all on YouTube, and I liked what you were doing. And I was a big fan, and sometimes I kind of feel like I'm resting on my laurels. You guys fire me up when I hear about things that I don't like to hear about happening in the workforce. And you guys also give me hope because, you see victories in union elections and grievances and things of that nature. So that's why I listen. And as far as what I think you all could do better, there isn't much. I think you all are doing a wonderful job. The only thing I ask for is if you could link in the description of your YouTube videos or on Spotify or whatever platform people use, link information to the websites of the people that you're speaking with and other resources, just because sometimes I can't remember everything from the 3-hour episode that I want to look up later on. So if you guys could do that, that would be all I would really ask for. So keep up the good work and fighting the good fight, and thank you all for what you do. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John from Kentucky. I appreciate the call, and if you would like to call in and let us know why you listen to the Valley Labor Report, we would appreciate it. 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We're going to try to do some promo stuff, pile all these together. So
Yeah. So really appreciate that, John. I'm so glad that this program can provide you some information, can give you a little bit of inspiration for the fight. I also hear the suggestion. I think that's really smart. I think we have not done a great job when it comes to the episode descriptions and linking resources and things like that. We're always trying to improve things. This is very much a labor of love that we do, and we're not professionals, so that's great helpful feedback. I think that's something we can incorporate. But yeah, keep these voicemails coming. We love to hear from folks about why you're tuning in. There's a lot of things you could listen to, but if you choose to listen to us for whatever reasons, we'd love to know, and it really helps us, and we hope to keep growing this project and growing labor media broadly. And we try to use this platform to elevate worker struggles, to talk to interesting people who have, things to say about working class struggles in this country and, particularly in the South, but not exclusively. Really happy to be on the air in Chicago and Minneapolis now, which is really cool just to, engage with audiences there because, down south, we're learning a lot from the organizers in Chicago and Minneapolis. Y'all have been paving the way for a long time. I got involved, very much inspired by Chicago Teachers Union strike in 2012. And, seeing the way that the community in Minneapolis and the labor movement there has worked together over the recent months to resist fascism, to build power collectively, to, align contracts for years, to, just steadily plug away at building something special. So that's really cool. And I also just want to remind folks that we are on Means TV. Means TV is a really great project. It's a great platform. We always say that bosses have their media, workers need media too. And that's part of why we do this project. But part of that is also building our own platforms. We're glad to be on commercial radio and various forms of radio. We are glad to be on YouTube and Facebook and all that good stuff. But Means TV is pretty cool because they are building a worker-owned streaming cooperative. So there's a lot of great content on there. There's a lot of, opportunity for folks to learn, to be entertained, all that stuff. Just want to remind folks, you can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code, which is TVLR. You receive 20% off either your first month or the entire year. So definitely check out Means TV. I'm a big fan of Means Morning News. That is a regular watch or listen for me. There's some great documentaries on there as well, including Union Time, which is a classic about the organizing at Smithfield in North Carolina. Long battle there. Great documentary. Lots of great stuff on Means TV. So definitely check that out.
Adam, was there anything else that you wanted to get to before we wrapped up?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone who participated in May Day yesterday. Wherever you are, whatever you did, I've seen pictures from across the country and across the world. Lots of folks were in the streets. Lots of folks did community events. Lots of people did all kinds of activities. I saw where Knoxville was holding a screening of Harlan County, USA. There were, mass protests in North Carolina, Chicago, LA, elsewhere. Here in Alabama, we are trying to revive the tradition of May Day. I've been involved in this movement for over a decade now, and I've always been disappointed in Alabama's participation in May Day. Never really anything going on. Even you talk to labor union folks, they don't know about May Day. And so this year we tried something new. We tried to kind of kick off a week of action, because with Workers' Memorial Day and May Day in the same week, we should really make a big deal out of that. We should make a splash out of that. I think about the other side. They do that all the time. They literally invented something called School Choice Week, and they get a ton of press every year on that. The governor participates. They have photo ops left and right, tons of media coverage, right? Why don't we do that kind of thing? Why don't we take advantage of the fact that our calendar has 2 working class holidays in the same week? That is an opportunity to educate the public, to engage our members, to build alliances with the community. So this year in Alabama, we kicked off a week of action. Had a special live stream of the Valley Labor Report earlier in the week, where we highlighted organizations and activists from across the state, some of the things going on. Of course, we had a May Day event here in Huntsville in collaboration with the local DSA and 5051 chapters. It was a start, right? We're starting from scratch in Alabama when it comes to May Day. So whatever we accomplish this week and this year, I'm hoping we build bigger and better for the years ahead. So, I really just appreciate everybody who participated, whatever that looked like for you. Also want to give a shout out to United Campus Workers at Jacksonville State. They are doing remarkable work. United Campus Workers generally is doing remarkable work organizing in the public sector, particularly here in the South, where there is no union recognition, there are no collective bargaining rights, no legal right to strike, but they're building worker power. They're organizing, they're coming together as workers in a wall-to-wall union representing anyone who draws a paycheck from the college or university. And so I want to, just really lift up the United Campus Workers, because when I look across the state of Alabama, who has the juice? Who has the organizing energy? Who's out there fighting the good fight? I see UCW. I see what y'all are doing. You're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to do the good work, even in really tough conditions. The legislature in Alabama passed a law this past session to attack universities, to go after faculty senates, to really interfere with tenure and academic freedom. And so they're facing some really tough odds, but I want to lift up in particular the Jack State chapter. They held an event on Workers' Memorial Day on April 28th, a Student Workers Awards Luncheon. And this was an event held and hosted by the union, and they gave out awards to graduate and undergraduate student workers on campus. It was such a phenomenal event. I think there were like 80 people in attendance, some of the workers, some of their family members, some of their, colleagues were there, just to really celebrate their hard work. And, they had a first, second, and third prize. They honored all of the nominees and shared a little bit about why they were nominated, the cool things they do on campus to keep the campus running. So I want to lift up that because it was a great event. It was well done. It was a way to celebrate the hard work that these student workers are doing, often very underpaid and, overstretched. Heard stories from some of these student workers who are doing multiple jobs while trying to, pursue their education. And I really appreciated the opportunity to address that group for a couple of minutes and just express my solidarity as a member of this labor movement and as their CWA sibling, how much it meant to me to see that event and to see young union members being recognized because, you know, I know what it's like to be the youngest person in the room. And even to this day, I often am in a lot of labor circles. And that really shouldn't be the case. But I love that United Campus Workers is getting young people involved, and I want to encourage them to stay involved. You know, don't be deterred. There will be some, you know, obstacles. There will be people who don't make it easy on you. You know, everyone loves to talk about how much they want the youth involved and how they can't get the youth involved. But then when the youth actually try to get involved, a lot of times it's not always friendly. It's not always open and receptive. But I just want to encourage, you know, our younger brothers and sisters, stay the course. Don't give up. Your voice needs to be heard. And we need you to continue to emerge as leaders. We need leaders. I know we had some conversations today about like what can go wrong with leaders. And when we put them on a pedestal, we give them that celebrity treatment. But we do still need leaders, people who have the courage, the knowledge, the discipline, the inspiration to make things better. I'm reminded of Reverend Jesse Jackson. He talked about this a lot in his, I believe it was his 84 convention speech. He talked about leadership and what it meant, what it was. And he said that time is neutral. It does not change things. But leaders with courage and initiative can change things. So I want to celebrate United Campus Workers for building up young leaders, new leaders into the movement. They also participated in the Week of Action this week in Alabama. They held a really cool Labor Fest in downtown Jacksonville, bouncy house, live music, history teach-ins, whole 9 yards. So shout out to my siblings in CWA for organizing in the public sector despite the odds. We see you, we appreciate you, and we want to encourage all union members out there to let us know what you're doing. Give us a call, leave us a voicemail, send us a note, 844-899-TVLR. We'd love to highlight your activism, your organizing, your struggles, and let folks know what you're doing to make people's lives better for them and better for the whole community. And if you are a non-union worker and you're listening to this, remember that you can take power in your life, in your workplace. When you organize and you come together in solidarity, you can do a lot. You can accomplish some amazing things. So keep organizing, keep talking to folks, keep listening to folks, and building this movement so we can actually have a future we can really believe in.
That's going to be it for us this week, folks. Appreciate y'all tuning in. You can find us online, tvlr.fm. Donate to the program, tvlr.fm/donate. Buy our merch, tvlr.fm/store. And we'll see you next week.